All right. So what I was going to be going over today is going to be a blend of understanding what UEM is and kind of what FileWave does. The reason being, I am one of the SCs on this group, so I've been doing it for about a year now. No, a little over a year now. So I've kind of integrated into the sales side, kind of like Corey and a few others on this channel. Uh, there was a learning curve for me understanding this technology just because there was uses that I used it in my past history, but I never really understood that this was a standalone technology. So is anybody familiar with UEM? I'm just curious. No? Okay.
So
Yeah, not so much.
What's it stand for? There's so many acronyms in the security world now.
Fair. That's fair. So it's Unified Endpoint Management. Essentially what that means is think of MDM, but its new iteration. It's gone beyond the realm of just what traditional MDM can be, and I'll kind of touch base on that a little bit. But it would be healthy to call it the next iteration of MDM, as it does go beyond what a traditional MDM. Now, if somebody were to say, "Oh, it's an MDM," like, all right, yeah, I won't fight you on it, but it's its own distinction. So, what exactly unified endpoint management is basically software that monitors and manages and secures all of an organization's end user devices from a single console, regardless of the operating system and location. These two last pieces are pretty much what really kind of starts to deviate from MDM. Now, location traditionally, MDM's been able to work with devices that are outside of an organization, much as like phones have been a part of integrating into the BYOD infrastructure and allowing laptops to leave the premises. So location is one of those features that grew into MDM. But in this particular part, it's the operating system. And that's really where Unified Endpoint Management, UEM, really sticks itself aside from traditional MDM.
Could you maximize that window?
Oh, yeah.
Like full screen it?
Do I?
Warlock, aren't you able just to zoom in with? Oh, never mind. Sorry, I'm on the phone. I could just zoom in. You can't.
Yeah.
Enhance.
Of course, I'm able to zoom in, man. I'm watching you with the satellites right now, buddy.
Where are you at,
Stop
Warlock? Are you like
subtitles.
a restaurant or something?
Let me see.
I'm hanging out with my cabal.
Cigar Lounge.
I wanted to present on this show. Sorry, let me try this. Well, that doesn't help. Sorry, I don't really use PowerPoint anymore. Why are you sharing the next screen? Sorry, is that doable?
Yeah, this is fine. This looks good.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. So yeah, so as I kind of was mentioning, UEM really kind of came about from the need to really expand beyond the traditional MDM solution, which was as technology and enterprises K through 12, really just anybody that has an infrastructure, they were introducing operating systems that were outside of conventional, just Windows machines. You start introducing MacBooks, you start introducing iOS devices, Androids, Chrome devices. When you start introducing those devices, naturally they come with their own siloed management system. You got your SCCM or Intune for Windows, you got your Jamf for your Macs, and etc. And then you, of course, have the other operating systems. But outside the United States, and specifically in the United States, there is a big presence with Android devices, specifically Chrome and Android iPhones, Android tablets that are used. So outside the United States, there is a big demand for that. So really, this is where we kind of get into UEM as kind of allowing enterprises to have a single pane of glass solution that would assist them with the management of their various operating systems. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of just skip over that one real quick, just because I kind of already brought it up through just speaking. So UEM really brings in a few characteristics that help define it. Being able to provide BYOD containerization, network configuration management, application management, content management, which is important for especially when we start talking about schools, identity access management, and security management. This wheel is just a simplified representation of what you can do with UEM, and this is what basically FileWave piggybacks off of as far as a product standpoint, and really provides this to a multitude of organizations. So I'll just piggyback from this into the exit full screen into kind of my FileWave console. And is that okay, Sean? Just kind of bring this up right here.
Yeah, this is perfect.
All
You
right.
can do kind of a demo of what FileWave does and all that.
Yeah, I'll kind of give a brief one. And of course, if anybody has any questions, like any true demo, please ask questions. We're all here to learn. In the software sphere, there are some competitors that are going to vary, and I've actually used our competitors when I was on the other end, from sysadmin positions, really kind of using them, and you may have used some of them in your own job functions, so you may or may not see some similarities, some distinctions. If it registers at all, perfect. FileWave really stands on two pillars. And all the UEM that I've brought up, it really stands on two pillars. And this is what I really like to emphasize when it comes to products like FileWave. Visibility, which is important for any organization, understanding where your devices are, what they're doing, what's happening on them, because they are physically beyond your reach. From an administrator perspective, you want to know where your devices are geographically and what is going on inside of them from a software and hardware perspective. It's important. The second pillar is being able to then control those devices, being able to extend applications, extend configurations, be able to push out really anything that you need to bundle up and make available to that device. So, in a nutshell, one of the best places to start off with understanding the kind of visibility that FileWave has is within its client visibility dashboard. This is going to provide the full fleet of devices that are enrolled. So I'll kind of just show this client section right here. This essentially is going to show any organization, be it our enterprise customers, our K through 12, our higher ed, regardless of what operating system they have. This is where you're going to be able to see the variety of them. I have a few in here that kind of just highlight the distinction between the two and really kind of share how you can see all those multiple operating systems from a single place. You can see I have some Windows devices, I have some Mac, Chrome. I do have an iOS device that has its own little tab, but that's neither here nor there. Altogether, what you have here is a cohesive way to be able to digest this information. And from an administrator standpoint, you want to be able to see this all from a single pane of glass. Again, kind of going back to what I mentioned, in some contexts and in some enterprises, they have one solution for the Macs, one solution for the Windows, another solution for the Chrome devices. This divides a team, this splits up the ability for them to really collaborate for, in the instance that somebody's gone, you lost somebody, or somebody takes that knowledge with them. It really creates a gap should something happen. Because this is all coming from a single solution, you really minimize those gaps and those possibilities. So from here, you can take a few steps. You could see all your devices in their entirety, or to the first pillar that I kind of talked about, we start looking into visibility, digging under the hood, whether we're talking about our Mac devices, We could dig a little deeper. Pretty important elements is understanding what's physically going on with these devices. And this is information that pulls from those devices continuously. So as it updates, we can use this information to understand when it last connected, what users have been logging in, the storage that's going on, and if necessary, from an administrator standpoint, you can understand what applications are currently on that device. So really, this is just what I like to highlight. This section is about providing administrative teams the ability to understand what's happening on that device at that moment. If we go a step further, we can of course create reports, which is this section right here, our inventory queries, which generates reports and uses all the multitude of information that is available from the, what was it called? Spacing, device details, and other components. We can compile reports that allow us to understand, create custom configurations, create custom reports that will update us with that information. So this is just providing more of that visibility. But I digress. This kind of visibility is also, what I like to make clear, available with all of our devices. Whether we're talking about our MacBooks, the visibility is going to be the same for our Windows, for our Chrome, for our iOS devices. The list is full breadth there. This is the part where I typically ask people that I'm going to call with, is there any questions? But I'll just toss that out there just because I see everyone's muted. But of course, please ask if you have any questions. This is the visibility section.
So I actually do have a question for you.
Yes.
So, one of the big things you were talking about for UEM was talking about the BYOD environment in businesses. So a lot of this data that you're gathering, especially in terms of location data,
Yes.
as well as application data that's on the machine, it's sort of troubling to me in a way of how you would go about wording, your acceptable use policies or your BYOD device policies. To ensure that your employees are okay with getting that information. But from a privacy standpoint, I do have some issues with this, and I look at enterprise device management, containerization for all your enterprise stuff on a privately owned device for BYOD. How can FileWave sort of keep what it's looking at inside of that container as opposed to looking at the entirety of the device itself?
Great question. And I have specifically brought that up with our DevOps team with the same thing in mind. How do we successfully share? So how do we successfully communicate that a BYOD device will be able to function and be used without it encroaching, obviously, on personal information? This would be a feature functionality solution, so being able to containerize. It's not a feature that is currently available in FileWave at the moment. I have definitely been harping on this one since I've joined. So to answer your question, there isn't currently a way, but
Okay, that's cool. I mean, this looks like a really awesome tool for enterprise device management, like business-owned devices. Fantastic. I saw that you had brought up in the pillar in that earlier slideshow about the BYOD environment, and so I was just trying to rectify how this fit into that. But I get that it's kind of hard to
yes,
to do both.
yes, and to that point, that pillar is a great example to bring up. Much like any product, it's going to be tailored to a very specific approach or a very specific kind of philosophy behind the company. That pillar really is going to highlight what the nature of the technology is. So having things like network visibility, while is a function that is a part of UEM, that specific feature is not going to be something that FileWave is going to be producing. So there are going to be elements of the technology that FileWave won't be adopting. But as it changes and as the market kind of increases, for example, the need to be able to silo personal information from a BYOD device, specifically because we can support it, it does create a precedence for that feature to be introduced in future iterations. Yeah.
All right, cool, man. Thank you.
So I'll just make a brief comment here. I have to deal with this myself. I use Graphene OS on Pixel devices, and so there's an app called Insular, which is a later version of something called Island. And so it splits the device into something called mainland and island. And mainland is it's like you're giving it a lobotomy. It's like two separate phones. So if you have to have Outlook and Teams and all kinds of corporate BS, installed, it keeps it completely segregated onto its own separate thing. I mean, if you try to if you load up like a contacts app or something, right? And then you load up the island version of it, it will not see any of your contacts that are in your main. And also, it's good to use that for segregation of Google Play services because Graphene OS doesn't naturally come with it. So you can actually have that installed on the island side, the work profile side, and none of the apps on your mainland, your regular phone space, have access to Google Play services. You do not want that. So that's a nice little Android solution. And I believe there should be something very similar to that in iPhone, but I'm not too familiar with that.
Can you do me a favor and post something, any kind of reference to that in the text? Because I would be very interested to see if I could. So the next thing I'll kind of be showing is deployments, and one of the great functionalities of FileWave is its ability to deploy just about anything. And as we're talking about this conversation, being able to silo personal information and enterprise information, if finding a way to leverage that application to do that very same thing. I mean, it's.
However, if there was some sort of agent, one master agent software to rule them all, and I'm like, they're like, you gotta load this up here. I'd have a stern conversation with them, saying like, okay, can I just have Outlook and Teams and a few other things on there? Because literally, even if it had, it is segregated and it's on its own separate profile. So if for some reason they want to wipe it, they can't wipe your whole phone. But that's a limitation within the phone rather than you're trusting your corporate IT department to be nice to you and not wipe all your stuff just because they got paranoid like you. So
yeah. Well, speaking of wiping, let me actually go ahead and bring this back up again. When we're talking about devices that go beyond the perimeter of a team, and in instances, devices do get lost, stolen, misplaced. It just happens. We do also have the ability to remote wipe. This is simply a command that's uploaded to the device. Once the device gets that command, it will wipe it to the operating system. So any data that's on there, it's bye-bye. It takes about a minute to fully go through. I've tested it a few times on my VMs and on my iPad, and yeah, it takes about 90 seconds, a minute to 90 seconds from when the command actually goes out, and that bad boy just wiped that whole sucker gone. So.
Well, that's another thing worth mentioning is that with this kind of a setup with Graphene OS, it's not a stock Android thing where any application ever has like privileges at all. Not even Google Play services because I run Sandbox. So if some corporate software was loaded up on that work profile and you had some admin go, we have to wipe this or we have to do this. I mean, there is no root level action possible by them, which means that if you want to limit those permissions yourself, you've got complete control of that on Graphene OS. Just FYI. It's a nice feeling.
Yeah, if you don't mind putting something in that text, so I can look into it because I'd be very interested to explore that. I'm currently making up an imaging solution that is a workaround, and I'm just basically gonna package it as it was intentionally designed. And I'll kind of describe that briefly. But yeah, I'll move on. If anybody else has any questions.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Can your tool wipe a device if it's turned off?
No.
No. Okay.
As soon as that thing turns back on and connects to the internet, yes, that command is going to be sitting in the queue waiting. So if it's off and it turns on a week later, it'll be sitting there waiting for it. So long as the command is still active, I don't want to delete any one of these. Do I? Do I?
And the reason I ask, I know it's a silly question, but I know like certain devices like iPhones,
Mhm.
they can be set in a way where they're even though they're off, they're technically on. So I didn't know if even for like mobile devices if that was an option.
Thank you for clarifying that, Sean. I was like, what are you talking about if it turned off?
Yeah, that's called a Smurf attack.
Yeah, that I think is
And,
well.
and also, there is one good approach to this whole thing. There is no substitute for physical security, physical separation. So I highly recommend don't split your personal phone ever. Take the extra effort of carrying a second phone because that way you can turn it off. Just FYI, guys.
That's true. Maybe I'll have to bring that up. Like, company, I need a new phone.
That's what I
Warlock
did.
said so. All right. So yeah, that's a little bit about the visibility. Something I like to kind of also mention within this because it's simply right here. For the teams that have a need for troubleshooting purposes, we also have Team Viewer. Some people get a little up in arms depending on how much they know about Team Viewer in the past 5 years or not. We do leverage Team Viewer to provide the administrators of whoever's working on FileWave the ability to remote into those machines and provide troubleshooting or remote just connections. It's a function that's part of the control, but also troubleshooting element of FileWave. All right. So next, I move on to the second pillar, and this is kind of basically towards the last half of what I kind of have to show. File sets are what we call anything that needs to be deployed. I call our file set section our docking station. This is where we package everything, load it up onto the trailers, and send it out. This is where you will make preparations for everything that is going to be an application, a script, software updates, profile configurations, restrictions, preferences, anything that needs to basically be deployed to your endpoint, it's going to be done here. So one of the things I like to say, if you can script it, you can package it. So any kind of script that you need to upload, any already up and running application, an exe, MSIs, really just the list goes on, or actually it doesn't go on, it's visibly right here, available. And this is where we kind of start getting into the control, being able to make sure that whatever information, whatever data, whatever resources need to be made available to those devices that are, again, not physically in your vicinity can be done so. So I'll kind of expand a little bit of these to kind of just show what we're kind of looking at. So we can create configuration policies that have things like password restrictions or network configuration preferences that once they're pushed out to those devices, they can be applied so that you as an administrator can manage those preferences. You can push out standalone applications, maybe the core default applications that you want a device available to have. These is where you would package that. And let me show. This is where you would be doing it for Windows, iOS, Mac, any of your operating systems you're going to be doing from here. So really, this is just a staging place. I like to kind of just highlight that. Yeah, that's
I have a question for you.
yes.
Okay, will this leverage Intel ME and Intel vPro for remote lifetime management on corporate device?
I did not fully understand that question.
Have you heard of Intel ME or vPro?
I don't. What are those? No, I haven't.
So, are you familiar with like how on a server, let's say Dell? Okay, Dell has like a little data board kind of thing that's snapped in, called the iDRAC. and it's basically it's a server feature called Lights Out Management. Have you heard of that?
No, not off the top of my head, no.
It's a common like corporate IT function of servers where you can actually connect to the iDirect interface. It's got a separate network interface. It's got a separate web sort of appliance feel, and you can say, okay, I'd like to shut this server down, like power it off, and that will always remain with power, so you can always talk to it, and it is like a remote KVM, remote everything. You can just power it off, power it on, like physically power off the server, physically power it on, but remote. And laptops, corporate laptops, I guess, that's one of those things that's leveraged in those for desktop machines or whatever. But unfortunately, it's baked into every Intel device. Thank you, Intel. So, yeah.
So it's a feature. It's not an application?
Yeah, it's like Intel ME is baked into every Intel chip, all of them, including the ones in your laptop or desktop. And
Yeah.
you can't get rid of it. It's an operating system with an operating system.
I'm not familiar with it, so I wouldn't know how to answer that one in the context of the deployments. Now, if you were to say that yes, that is an application that you can spin up on your end, put up the client or the installer, the application that you would need to push out to those servers or devices, then yes, the conversation would be absolutely we can deploy that. But it sounds like it's already built into it, so I'm just not familiar with that and how it would work.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Question?
Yes.
Cool. This has been really neat to see. I've never seen this before. Thank you for presenting. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking for this, I'm actually looking really forward to the deployment area and the imaging, by the way. But back to this, I'm thinking of WinGet, Windows, on
Mhm.
how to install applications like third-party ones. Is this maybe on the future roadmap for this vendor to integrate WinGet?
WinGet, remind me. I'm spacing on WinGet.
Oh yeah, I'll put it in the text. It's basically Microsoft's new package management for applications. I put in the meetup text. It's based.
Yeah. So, oh man, this was actually brought up a few weeks ago, and I was half paying attention. So I know that this is actually in the roadmap. Yes, I know this is the roadmap. I can't recall off the top of my head what the context was. But yes, that is in the pipeline to be integrated or added to. I specifically remember hearing that, and I was just
No worries. No
unfortunately
worries.
zoning out.
It's all good.
You know
One
how it
more.
gets in those meetings. It's 6 a.m. What am I doing here?
Sure. And I think I might have, speaking of like, what am I doing here? I might have missed it. These are agents on the machine, correct?
Yes. So when it comes to so there's two primary ways, or so let's break it up into deployments. That's kind of what you're asking, or of the actual client. When it comes to the Windows side, we have two routes. We can do the Azure MDM enrollment, which is a pretty straightforward, kind of creating a space in your Azure AD to make space for FileWave, and then integrating it, logging in on your device through Windows MDM. That's one version. The other version for Windows is creating an MSI that you then get onto that device and then just run it. So like any installer you'd run. For the Mac side, you have again two options. You have your DEP enrollment, which would leverage Apple Business Manager. For the organizations that don't have it or are transitioning to something like that, we make sure we properly configure it. Or you have the manual approach, which is again either a URL installer that you can pull from the web, or you can create the package, much like the MSI, get it onto the device and then run it. In that instance, the package on the Mac device will provide full visibility, but it won't have a fully supervised control. So kind of the whole managed versus unmanaged, or not, it's not managed, fully supervised versus not fully supervised with Apple. So that's really the only distinction. But there's those two. There's a manual one, and then there's the quicker one.
And with that quicker one, is that something I could send an email to a client that I want them to click on the thing on their device and it'll install?
Yeah. So if we're talking about Windows, all they would have to do is simply, I mean, I have the document up, but I don't know if I want to pull it up. Just having those Windows users log in. So when you go onto the Windows login and you're able to log in versus through school or some other account in the settings, it's basically having them log through that, and then it'll enroll into the Azure enrollment. And with the Mac side, it is simply the person who's in charge of Apple Business Manager uh, going into Apple Business Manager, finding that device in their account, assigning it to FileWave, and that's it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so it's very quick. Those ones often do require uh, organizations to have that already set up, but once they're already set up, it's a very quick process. It's just going back and clicking, changing, applying. Yeah.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm sorry if I might have missed it. I know Jesse brought up WinGet. Do you know if you guys have any support for chocolatey?
I don't know what that is.
Chocolatey is a like WinGet. It's a package manager. It's pretty. It's like for automating software installs.
Oh, the automation software we're using is Auto PKG?
Okay, that sounds familiar.
Auto PKG. Yeah, Auto PKG. This was rolled out about 3 weeks ago for us, so I have yet to test it out on my end. But essentially, it's going to be our way of automating patching, and but the deployments, it's going to still be kind of this.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Jesse, one of the things you mentioned was being able to kind of look at imaging, and I can kind of address the imaging pretty quickly. So our imaging right now is basically a Pixie boot. And if we're talking about this imaging right here, it's a Pixie boot. You make a master image, you upload it onto FileWave, you apply it by dragging it onto the device you want to apply it to, hitting upload model, it sends it out. It's that straightforward. But because it is a Pixie boot and it does require you to have physical possession of the device, that does run into a bit of an issue with those users that basically get their device shipped out to them. I'm sure a lot of us, when we've joined companies in these newer age, we kind of just get a machine sent to us. It might be fresh out of the box. I've had that now twice now, so right, they're not pushing any images onto it. What we do have, and this is kind of one of the projects I've been working on for deployment, so I'll kind of explain what I've been doing here, is because we can send out a multitude of things from applications, folders, text documents, scripts, configurations, preset configurations. We can get pretty granular with it. We can basically bundle a out-of-the-box deployment that would have all the necessary items for a brand new machine, given it just uses the existing operating system that it comes with, or version. I would just say because it's not like you're putting a different OS on it, right? It's just different versions with more stringent configurations. But we can do that through file sets. So creating a bundle out the door box ready to go deployment with all of these various, in this case, like applications, configurations, kind of building it out right now, items that you can send out to those devices as they're brand new. And with organizations that might already have Apple Business Manager or can enroll those devices through Azure AD, this essentially provides them a way to image that device without ever touching it. So it kind of is a proactive without having to re-image those devices. So it's kind of what I'm calling light imaging
Is that the same as zero touch?
Um, yes and so it's not zero touch. So as I understand it, I mean, the user would still need to log in, create an account, go through the stock OS that is on that machine. Once that connects to the internet, this package will be waiting for that device to take in. So I guess yes and no. It's something I discovered. It's something I've been playing with. So it's not something that was designed on purpose. It's something I'm more working through on my own end to kind of repackage to make a workaround be more intentional than anything. So I've just basically rebranded it. It's a workaround. That's
Real
Okay.
quick,
a workaround.
I have a scenario where, hey, let's say ransomware happens across a bunch of Windows devices and you need to re-image them.
Correct.
This seems like it would do it fairly well and
Yes.
easy, especially where you were dragging that image. Like, oh yeah, we already have the image. We just need to, find all the different machines and then drag it onto the machine.
Correct. You're absolutely correct. Yes.
Cool.
Hey, HappyFeet, just a heads up, we're at time pretty much. If you want to wrap it up.
Yeah. The last one really was associations. Kind of Jesse, you were mentioning wanting to be able to understand a little deployments. Deployments, I'll briefly address associations first. Associations is basically where we just bind our file sets that we've created into our clients. And I do that simply by, let me take my Mac. It's one of the great things about packaging. It can be done to scale regardless of the size. So I could take all of my Mac apps and apply that to an individual device or a folder, regardless of the size. I'd be able to do so. And this allows organizations to address any deployment regardless of the scale. And this is just a record of those connections you can kind of use. And deployments is essentially just bundling associations. It's one deployment can be multiple associations, and it's just a way that can make it look a little cleaner, because after a while, this can get, if you have like thousands of associations, it's going to start getting pretty heavy. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Well, anybody else have any other questions for Jesse?
Or HappyFeet?
Oh, sorry, HappyFeet.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. Got some good questions. I actually do want to kind of explore that function that Warlock was sharing, and I'm very curious to see if I can deploy that and kind of make use of that containerization.